So basically, the first of all thing is we open up the Effect House application. Now, the first thing I do in this application is I'm downloading all my assets. That way they're already there, ready for me to use. So as you see, I have 3 different texture sequences, but because I don't want them all lay in the same spot, I changed the sort of each one, so then that way the pictures aren't in the same spot every time. So then when we run 3 sequences, they are going to be different each time. The next step I do is I go through and I make sure that I rename each sequence, so that way I'll know which one it is. As you can see, that's what I'm doing now. You will want to rename all your assets because it will help in the long run when you're setting things up. After I get all my sequences renamed, then I go ahead and just kind of do my little tweaking, like frames per second, things to that effect. This part is all optional. You don't have to do my frames per second. That's just what I did. Now, next thing I'm doing is I'm bringing up my view so you can see what you're making on the side. First thing I'm doing is I'm pulling up the portrait segmentation. The portrait segmentation is the key point, because this is where you actually put a background and where you're going to position your person. So what I'm doing is I'm importing my background. So once I get my background imported, I go on the right side of the properties and I change that background properties to the one I imported. Once I get that set up, then I go ahead and position it to get the best place I want. The second part is I'm actually physically moving the portrait of the person down, so that way they're not taking up the whole entire screen. Okay, what I'm doing here now is I'm inserting a 3D image placement box. I'm going to rename it so it follows the same sequence names. And then to make it easier, I'm just going to right click on it and duplicate 2 more times. That way I have all 3. And I also rename them the same. Once I get them renamed, I'll go on the right hand side of the properties again, click on the texture, and then I'm going to choose the sequence of the same name to be placed. Once you see those names all get put in, the sequences will show up, as you can see there. Now what I'm doing is I'm placing them where I want them on my screen. I'm going to speed this up a little bit because this is basically me just tweaking placements. Once I get my images placed, then I'm going to go on the back on the left-hand side where the names are. I'm going to uncheck all 3 boxes. The reason for this is I'll explain a little more when I get into the visual scripting. But for now, I've just unchecked all the boxes. And then what we're going to do is we're going to duplicate 1 more box. This is going to be for the title. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into my imports. Now I'm going to do an import from the computer one more time. I'm going to grab the title graphic that I created earlier. Once I bring that over into Effect House, then again, I click on the title box and I go into the properties on the right-hand side. Because I duplicated it, I need to rename this box as well. So I'm naming it as title. That way it kind of gives you an idea what we're looking for. Then I go over to the right-hand side of the properties. And we're going to choose texture. And we're going to choose the title that I imported just a few seconds ago. Okay, so when I duplicated that image box, the view checkbox was unchecked. So I need to make sure I recheck that to bring the title back onto my screen so that I can place it where I need it to go. This will always stay checked. This is something that's always going to be on the screen at the very beginning, so it has to be checked. There's other ways around that, but this is the most simpler way. And now I'm just placing it, making whatever size I need to be. Okay, this is where the visual scripting is going to start coming in. I'm going to click on the asset that I need to use. As you see, there's nothing there, but then there's an option to add interaction. And what that is that's going to give you your basic visual scripting, as you can see it down at the bottom. Now, as you can see, the visual scripting is going to start showing up here at the... Okay, so my next step is I'm going to go ahead onto the side where the asset is. I'm going to click on the add interaction. Okay, so on the right-hand side, we're going to add interaction. The interaction is going to drop down into the visual scripting where you actually modify your visual scripting however you want it to be. Right now, I'm just doing placement, so it's easier to read. Okay, so what I'm doing now is I'm going actually into the visual scripting and I'm making my own little modification. And this is what I was talking about where the checkbox was checked. I'm going to run a line from the out of this section and grab a utility. And I'm going to set the visibility to negative. This is going to be for the title sequence. So once I tap on that screen, the title sequence is going to disappear. Okay, this is why I suggest taking the checkboxes off, because you don't want the images on the screen when the title's on the screen. So now you're going to go into the event report, and we're going to go in there and we're going to add a utility. So from the set animate texture, I'm going to run a line off the next. With that line running off, I'm going to add another node from the utilities, and it's going to be set visibility. Now in this set visibility node, we're going to make sure we put the checkbox on for visible. We want visible on. Now I'm going to select a target, and I get that from my textures. As you can see, the name, slab 1. Now everything lines up. I go back to my main graph, and I just kind of move this out of the way so it's good to go. And I test it, and you watch. Notice how the title screen disappears just like I want it to, and the sequencer starts running on the very first sequence box. But you can't see any other boxes there. That's because I haven't set those up yet. Alright, so here's the rest of them. Now the other two are basically identical, so I'm just going to go ahead and run this really fast so you don't need to see that whole same situation over and over and over again. We'll get all three set up. After I've got pretty much everything set up, I like to double check to see, make sure my file's not too big. So I click on that little option up there that says click to update. That'll tell me how much space I've actually used on the file. That's not very much at all. Okay, so now I test it. And there it goes. Those are my 3 celebrities. But you notice how my timing was off a little bit? So I got to go in and change my delay on the other 2 because I didn't change them from before. So now they all should be the same. And we're going to test it out. I click, disappears, there they go. And notice how they're never going to be the same person at the same time. Because of the way when I created my sequence sorts, each sequence is a different sort. You have to have them in different sorts, or no matter what, you're going to land on the same person every time in each group, because they're going to follow suit regardless. That's why I create 3 different sorts to make those 3 different pictures. Now we're done.